And you're live, Lee.
I'm not seeing me on the computer.
Just give 1 second. There's going to be a little bit of delay for you.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, still don't see me.
I have
technology.
Do you see yourself on the computer now?
No.
Refresh it. Refresh.
Hold on, let me. Okay, I'm scrolling.
It should be on the top, the first one.
I see live. I think that's me.
There you go. Now just go ahead. Do your thing.
Well, I'm not moving in that picture.
It's working on my side, Lee.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Questions then. Sorry, we've got technology here that we're trying to sort out, and I'm going to do my very best to do this. Do we have questions for me? I've had one question. Should I go ahead and get started with those questions?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I had one question that was posed was when I'm recording with Phil Collins, how much input do I have in my parts? When most of the recording I did with Phil was one instrument at a time. Phil would do like a drum loop kind of a thing because he fully planned on replacing his drums later. And then he would do like a little keyboard thing with some chord changes. So many times didn't even have lyrics yet to the songs. And one of the first instruments that always was put on was me. So he kind of left it up to me to come up with bass parts. If he heard something that he wanted that was specific, he would tell me. But for the most part, he would really leave it up to me to do what I thought was right. And then after I would finish my parts, then Daryl Sturmer would come in and do guitar, and Phil would later on do his drums and whatever sweetening horn section and all that. But I was kind of the first guy, and I was kind of left on my own.
So Craig Lermo wants to know, say, I'm a huge fan of your playing and your personality.
Oh, I see his question.
There you go.
About Dingwall basses?
Yes, go ahead.
I was at a NAMM show. God, it must have been 16, 17 years ago. And I was walking down an aisle, and normally I've always been pretty happy with my gear. So I would usually end up walking by people's booths, and they'd say, "Oh, you got to try my stuff out." And I go, "Nah, it's okay. I'm good. I'm good." But this guy came up to me at one of the shows just with one of his basses, and he said, "Would you please, would you like to check out one of my basses?" And it was Sheldon. And I took a look at the bass, and I looked at the fan fretting and everything, and I said, "Explain. Tell me what this is all about." And he told me about Ralph Novak's and the fan fret system and the tempering of the instrument. And I thought, of all the stuff I've seen at NAMM, this is the one that really intrigued me. And so we talked about it for a while, and he ended up sending me a bass to try out and work with. And the minute I plugged it in, I fell in love with it. Now, one of my issues was a lot of my work has been replacing synth bass from pre-programmed projects. And I was really never really satisfied with the B strings on most 5-string basses. But the kind of work I was doing at that point required a 5-string. So I think the B string is what sold me. as soon as I heard that B, I just went, this is exactly what I need. And every engineer, when I would take my bass into the studio, they would go, what kind of bass is that? And it seemed like I got people like converting to it the minute they would hear it. I mean, it's one of those things that you can look at it, do all that stuff, but the minute you hear it, then you know that this is something really special. So I love it. I've been very happy with that bass. It's pretty, and I love the relationship with Sheldon and the company. It's a remarkable place to work. I see more questions. My dream. Please help me buy a Dingwall. Because I might look like Santa Claus, but I don't have that ability here. Did Stratus bassline exist, or did you make? When I did Spectrum with Billy Cobham back in 1973, I was in a band called The Section. We were James Taylor's band and Jackson Brown's band. And at one point, we became the opening act for Mahavishnu Orchestra and ended up going on the road with those guys and for about 6 weeks, and got to watch them every night and play, and became friends with McLaughlin and Billy and Jan and Jerry and Rick Laird and the guys. Then Billy contacted me afterwards, and he said he got a record deal and wanted to know if I would come to New York and do this album with him. It was amazing. I flew to New York. We went into Electric Ladyland Studios, but the thing that kind of blew my mind was in the late 60s, I was in a band called Wolfgang, and we were handled by the same management team that handled a group called Zephyr. And Tommy Bolin was the guitarist in Zephyr. So he and I were friends back around 68. And in 73, I go walking into Electric Ladyland, and there's Tommy Bolin to play guitar on the project. He had come in a day early to go over like heads and things like that. Jan, I think, had sketched out a few things, but for the most part, they kind of left the parts up to me. The Stratus part was kind of, for me, it was my part. And it was amazing. We did that whole record, other than 2 tracks, we did that whole record in 2 days. It was an amazing experience. It still stands the test of time. So let's see. I hope that answers it. What's your favorite Dingwall bass? I've got whichever one I'm playing at the moment. You know, I have a few now, and I love them all. They're all great. It's been my road bass. I just finished Phil Collins's tour, 2.5 years out there, and I had 2 of my signature basses with me on the tour. One was just to be redundant in case anything happened, a string broke or anything like that. But I've loved every bass that I've tried with Sheldon. I'm not a massive gearhead. I can pretty much play whatever comes in my hands. And so I don't think I really have a favorite of them. I really like them all. Let's see what else we got here. Hi Lee from Canada, Ontario. Do you use any synthesizer boards? Where did that hit? For your bass? Well, when I was on the road with Phill back in 90, I think on 2004, I used Taurus pedals, and there was another company called Fast Forward that made a pedal called MIDI Step that looks exactly like Taurus pedals, but it's a MIDI controller pedal. And I would run like a Proteus 2 brain. And so for songs like In the Air Tonight, besides the part I'm playing, and I was just practicing today. Hold on. I've got my Dingwall bass sitting here right next to me. Yeah. And I would play my parts on that and then double them with the Taurus pedals and the MIDI pedal. The thing that was cool with the MIDI pedal, it had a button called Infinite Hold, and I had a volume pedal on it. I mean, I had a volume pedal hooked up to that pedal board so that I could do like a low C sharp for In the Air, and had that down like an octave or 2 below my regular bass. And then when the time came for it to come in, I would just go hit the volume pedal because it was already generating that tone, and could shake the building really good, man. It was like bitching. It was so cool. I'd say you're inspiring, but what inspires you? God, oh, life, everything. It's a joy to wake up every day and play music. I love gardening. I like working on cars. I'm profoundly concerned for the world right now because of this virus. We've lost a number of friends now that have actually died from it, so it's not anything to be taken lightly. And sitting here in this quarantine situation at home, I'm trying to make the best of that. I've been doing videos that are on YouTube of me. I'm playing my Dingwall and doing all the songs from Phil's last tour, showing the bass parts on them. And that's been fun to do that. But I'm inspired just kind of every day. I get up. I've got a wife. I've got my dogs. I've got kind of everything around me that I really enjoy, and I have a community of fellow musicians that I love dearly. So I would think that's pretty much. But just life itself, we're very fortunate, to be alive in this world. Let's see what else. The blue bass in your video signature. It was the prototype for the signature. So the blue one is just like my signature basses. The only difference is it doesn't have my signature on it. But it was the one that Sheldon built just before we went to the signature model. It was the last prototype of that. What amps do you use with your Dingwalls? I've been with a company almost as long as I've been with Dingwall, called Euphonic Audio. They're based out of New Jersey. And I was at a NAMM show, and I was ended up in a hotel room. Not like that. No, it's not like that. But Mike Tobias was showing off some of his instruments, and Brian Bromberg and I were wandering around together, and he said, "I'm going over to see Mike. You want to go say hi?" I said, "Sure," because Mike was a good friend. We got to the room, and there was a bunch of guys sitting in this room, just bam, 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 just slapping away. But I was kind of going, where the hell is the sound coming from? And I noticed two guys sitting on a bed over there, and I looked down between the two beds, and on the floor was a couple of 8-inch speakers and a little amp. And while these guys were all talking bass, I started talking to them, and it was Larry Ullman and John Dong who had Euphonic Audio. And I had them tell me about what they do. And I left the NAMM show and all that. I just kept thinking about that amp and those little speakers, and ended up contacting them about 2 weeks later. And I said, "Man, all I've been thinking about is your stuff." So he sent me a couple of those little 8-inch speakers and an amp to try out. And I ended up doing a gig at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. It was a tribute to Nicolette Larson, who had passed away. So it was a big fundraiser. And all these different guys were playing on it, ton of musicians. And I had my rig there. And the guys that were setting up, they said, "Okay, where's the bass rig?" I said, "It's on stage." And they went, they're walking around looking, we can't find it. I said, "It's out there right in the middle of the stage." And when they saw it, they almost died because it was the smallest thing on the stage was the bass, yet it sounded great. So I've been with those guys for a long time now. And on Phil's tour, I used their Pro Series head, a single 4x10 bottom and a single 1x12 bottom. The 1x12 bottom, I use a Yamaha sub kick in front of that instead of a microphone. And it's really an amazing sound that you can get with that. I set the sub kick about a half an inch from the grill cloth on the amp and right in front of it, because it's got an NS10 Yamaha speaker in it. So you've got this great dispersion of rather than a little tiny microphone in front. You've got this pretty big space for the sound to go into. And the 4x10 I love, but that's been my go-to rig with Toto, with Lyle Lovett, with our band, The Immediate Family. This setup works for me for just about anything. The EA rig, and it's also, I have one of their combos, and that's my studio amp, and that's like a single 12 and a built-in. I think it's the 800 watt head in it. And the best thing is it's on wheels with like a luggage handle. So when I'm parked a block away from the studio, it's easy to get my gear there. So let's see what else. Jesus, when music comes back, I was supposed to be doing the London bass show, or the Manchester bass show. That got canceled. I don't know what's going to happen with it. That'll probably be postponed till next year. Then I was supposed to be going to Switzerland to do a concert, and that's now been moved to November. I really don't know. I mean, we're really in a state of, not sure what's going to happen next. So I'm trying to do a bunch of projects, but everything I can do from home. I'm so ready to hit the road and get out there and work, but nobody can confirm anything yet because they can't take the chance on booking. We were supposed to be with our band. We were supposed to be in Japan soon, and that's been put off and indefinitely until we know it's not. Because with Japan, I mean, they even canceled the Olympics, so our tour really, wasn't a priority for that. So we'll see what happens. I hope sooner than later we can all get back out and start doing what we do. But for right now, the main thing is to stay home, stay safe, and let's get through this, intact. See what else. Love you so much. I love you too. It's thank you for the time you dedicate to your family. The fans, it's to me, one of my favorite things about this business is the relationship with fans. I've never felt any wall or any distance. When we used to do big, like the big sheds in the summers, like with James Taylor and Jackson Browne and all that, as soon as we would get there and they would open up the doors and people would be out on the lawns on their blankets, I'd go out and walk around and meet people, sit down in their blanket, have a piece of fried chicken with them, talk. And it was great. I've never shied away from fans because without fans, this is a hobby. And I love the relationship with the audience and with fans. And I always try to take as much time as necessary at gigs and stuff when we're leaving. If there's people outside, I go say hi to everybody. And I've met some fabulous people and developed friendships over the years that are ongoing now, and they've been going on for like 40 years. We've all kind of grown old together. Okay, let's see. There's a hi. What do we got? Let's see. I'm looking for more questions. We've got 30. Let me see what else I got. Love to you and your family. Thank you so much. Looking to see. I'm not seeing more questions coming up here. It says there's a bunch, but please send questions over this way. What are your settings? And my action on the Dingwall, I started out on upright bass, so I've always had fairly high action on my basses. As far as settings, on here, I always have, when I'm rotating to different selections, I always rotate all the way over the same. Everything's full on. My bass setting, bass and mids are all the way up and then back off just a notch. And treble is all the way up and not quite as much, but I kind of run full tone all the time, and I always run it active. I never really flip into the passive situation unless something really calls for it. But that's pretty much, I use like one setting pretty much does everything for me. I love the fact that the instruments have so many options on them because this really makes it a viable instrument for a lot of people. Because to me, it's like if you took 10 bass players and put them in a room and gave them one instrument, chances are you would hear 10 different sounds. Everybody plays so differently. Everybody's got their own unique style and their own unique settings that they do. So the instrument, to give it as much parameter possible, it is ideal. But for myself, I've found this one setting that really works for me. It's fat and punchy and rich, but it reads really well, and it seems to work on almost every project that I work on, be it movies, TV, recording, touring. It's kind of the same setting. I settled into it, and I haven't explored that much. Oh God, what is that? What's my favorite bass line playing with Phil Collins or Toto? Geez, that's hard. There's so much great material with both of those bands. Let me think for a second here. Because with Phill, some of my favorite stuff was really some of the ballads, like Separate Lives and stuff. It's really, you get to really be expressive in it. I remember when we recorded Sussudio, it was really funny. David Frank programmed all these synth parts because on the original record, it's all machine bass. And when it was all done, I looked at Phill and I said, we're screwed now, because what are we going to do when we go out live with this? But what we ended up doing, and for a while, I ended up doing it just plugged into like an envelope filter and playing the part. But what we've done on the last couple of tours is we run. It's the only show in the only song in the entire show where there's a sequence, and what we've got sequenced is the filter. I play the tonal notes of the part, and then and I'm doubling the synth, the pow 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 sound, and then it's mixed together. So I'm the tonal part of it. That's one of the kind of not the most difficult ones to perform, but it's sort of a bit of a nuisance. It's not quite like the other songs, but I've been so fortunate that the kind of artists that I work with, be it the James Taylors or Phil Collins or Lyle Lovitz or Toto, they're all really great songwriters, have really great songs. Some of the most fun I had was in the 90s. If nobody's familiar with it, there's some stuff on YouTube. I was in a band called Barefoot Servants, and it was John Butcher, Ben Schultz, and Ray Brinker and myself. And it was kind of like ZZ meets Hendrix. And great songs. John's one of the best singers I've ever worked with for rock and roll and stuff. So go check some of that out. I loved what we did with that band. It wasn't successful, and it ended up not happening, but it was sure some great kick-ass rock and roll. Let me see what else we got down here. What were the different? Let's see. What was the difference you noticed from your first to second stints? Well, my first and second stints with Toto were quite different. In the first one, Bobby Kimball was the singer, and Greg Fillinganes was playing keyboards. Tony Spinner was playing guitar, and Simon Phillips was playing drums. And of course, Lukather. Luke's I've known since he was 19 years old. But the second time I went out, Joe Williams was singing, and David Paich was playing keyboards, and Steve Porcaro was back playing keyboards, and Shannon Forrest was playing drums, and Lenny Castro was playing percussion, and Luke. So it was very, very different lineups, and for that reason, kind of different sounds. But it was kind of more like my early memories of Toto, because Shannon plays a whole lot like Jeff Porcaro did. So the songs felt more Jeff-like. And that's not to denigrate Simon by any means, because Simon is a monster, and God, I love playing with that guy. And he just twisted my head around every night. But it was quite different. It was like two different bands for me. And I loved them both. It was really, really great. I wish I could have stuck with them. But after the second stint with them, that's when Phil Collins decided to come out of retirement, and Phil was more of a priority for me because of our history together. So when they had the next leg of the Toto tour, I had to bail on them, and that's when Shem came in at that point. So let's see, would a more affordable production version of your signature bass be a bad idea? I don't know. That's really up to Sheldon. I've seen some lower price models of different basses that are done like in Asia, in China or Korea or different places. And, some of them are really good, but it would really be a consideration that Sheldon would have to make if they were going to do something like that. I'm not involved at all on that aspect of it. So write to Sheldon. Let me see, what do we got here? Thank you for answering our questions. You're I thought it said you were a unique person. Oh, it says unique. Let's see. Can you play Beatles on your bass? On your bass player in Jaime? Well, you can play anything on the bass. I mean, a bass is a bass. It's like playing Beatles stuff, playing, like Paul would sit there and he would play his Hofner parts on a Rickenbacker. An instrument's just a tool. It's all up to you how you use your tools. So I'm sure you can. Thanks, Lee. Greetings from Mexico. I can't believe it's 12 years since I met you. That's great. I have a real place in my heart for Mexico. My parents lived down in Guadalajara and Lake Chapala for about 30 years. So I used to go visit them in Mexico. I have a lot of friends. I have a friend in Mexico City who's a fabulous producer. And I've gone down and I went down to Mexico City and did a master class at the Fermata Music School. So I always love going down there. It's pretty great. Who inspired you to play, or who's the one who inspired you? Actually, I started on a piano, classical piano, when I was 5 years old. And when I entered junior high school, when I was 12, I kind of assumed I would be the piano player. They had a lot of piano players, but the music teacher, whose name was Ted Lynn, said, look, we need a string bass player. Would you be willing to try it? And he pulled an old K plywood blonde bass out of the back room. And I put it up next to me and I plucked a note and felt that vibration run through me. And I said, I'm sold, let's do it. And he gave me basic instructions. And I think he inspired me more than anybody. Almost anybody who plays a bass inspires me. I mean, it can be anybody from Jocko to Les Claypool. It doesn't matter. Everybody's got their own signatures. I was friends with John Entwistle and Jack Bruce, and those guys meant the world to me. But Ray Brown, when I was studying upright, and Mingus. You can glean things from everybody. So it's really... there's a world of bass out there. I'm kind of an insomniac. I'm usually up really late at night. And I tend to sit there and peruse through YouTube. And I see just amazing. I mean, I'm seeing kids 5 years old just that look like they're like aliens have fathered children on this planet. I mean, how the hell did they get to be this mature musician? When, at that point, I was probably still eating, dirt, and these guys are monsters. I don't know how the hell that happens. But I see amazing players, and I feel really fortunate that I'm part of that community. All my friends, like the David Hungates and the Michael Rhodes, and all the guys down in Nashville are great, and Will Lee and all the guys in New York are amazing, and friends in Europe and South America. So it's a fabulous community, and I feel inspired by all of them. I did a band a few years ago called Jostle through Warwick, and it was Jonas Hellberg and Steve Bailey, and I did a trio of basses. And I told him, I said, I would only do it if I can play bass, because these guys are like soloing monsters. And I'm not a real soloist. I'm a real song guy. I like songs. I don't really like bass solos for me. So we had a great time doing that, because we would do like Cobham tunes and stuff. And I would just hold down the bottom and they would do all the heads and all the soloing. So I got to be happy in my seat. I get real long-winded. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about here, but let's see what else we got. What is a solo you'd recommend listening to in transcribing to learn solo? Well, that's after I've just said I don't do solos. So I would just go through YouTube and find things that really kind of catch your ear, that inspire you. Um, Depending on your skills and your ability to transcribe, you might be able to jump into, like some guys have taken bass and do solos, based on John Coltrane. Whether or not you feel, that's a league that you can handle at this point or not, I don't know. And there's other things that are much simpler and really kind of fun to do, or you could see what Flea's doing. There's a lot of cats out there. So everything to me about the instrument is subjective. And when you're dealing with the arts, it's all subjective. Somebody might walk. I mean, I've done concerts and people have come up and said, it's the greatest thing I ever heard. And I'm sitting there in my skin thinking, I sucked tonight. It just didn't feel good. And other nights where I thought I was on fire. And somebody comes up and goes, it was okay. So it's really subjective, but find stuff that really kind of inspires you. Listen to music. And if you hear something that you go, God, that's really cool, then try to learn it, disseminate it. If you can, practice writing it out. It's great. The more skills you have, the better it is. I've never quite understand when I talk to players and they go, oh yeah, I can't read music at all. And I go, well, I hope you're not planning on becoming a studio musician, because you'll never work. You might get an occasional job, but so much, a lot of my work over my whole career has been doing movie dates and jingles and television shows. We did tons of TV, and everything's written out. They tell you the notes are there. Put your personality on it. So they give you a certain amount of leadway as far as your parts go. But basically the notes are there for a specific reason. So if you can, please, if you intend to do that kind of work, hone your skills as a reader. And like if you go to Nashville, they got number charts. It's a whole other form of stuff. It's another skill to learn, because I spent like 10 years working in Nashville, going back and forth, and it was all number charts. And so, hone as many skills as you possibly can. There's still stuff I wish I was doing that I haven't learned yet. I mean, it never ends. You always have something to learn. Let's see what else we got. Will you publish also the tabs of your most famous bassline? I wouldn't do it. If some people have said that they've done it, I haven't seen them though. I probably some of the stuff, if I saw it written, I'd probably go, I couldn't have played that. I can't even read it. It's so insane. No, but I had no intention of doing any kind of a published tabs on what I've got. But there's a lot of books out there, and a lot of the stuff I've worked on has been put into books and tabs. There was some guy working for, I think his master at Berkeley, said he was doing a bunch of my songs and doing them. I should contact them and see if I could get my hands on that stuff. But to answer your question, no. Hi from Switzerland. That's where I was supposed to be heading to. I was going to be doing a concert in Zurich at the beginning of May, and that's now been moved to early November with a fabulous electric cellist named Martin Tillman, who lives in Zurich. So I'm really looking forward to that. I was real disappointed when we had to cancel, because it's going to be a really unique, special concert. Okay, Rups, good to see you. What makes or breaks a session player? You're just disappeared real quick there. I didn't see the rest. Let me see if I can get back to the rest of his question there. Okay, here we go. What makes or breaks a session player? Any advice you can give someone who wants to do session work? There's a lot of aspects to session work. First off, it's a profession. When you get called for work, you treat it as a real job. If the downbeat is at 10 o'clock in the morning, you're not pulling in the parking lot at 10 o'clock. You're sitting in a seat, tuned, all organized, ready to start playing at 10 o'clock. Try to be the kind of person that people want to hang out with, because there's a lot of time spent together in the studio, and you don't want to be somebody that when somebody sees you walk in the door, they go, oh, God, I can't stand that guy. There's a lot of that. It's a real community feeling. Have your skills so that when you sit down, there's probably 80% of what I've ever done, I've never known in advance what I'm called for. It could be a country, it could be funk, it could be hip hop, it could be jazz, and try to have as many tools in your repertoire as you can so that when you sit down and something's put in front of you, you're able to do it. There's a few things that are really out of my league, and if I've known in advance about them, I've sometimes suggested other players that I thought were better. I've had a lot of hand injuries and wrist injuries, so I'm really not a good slap pop player. And so when somebody calls me and says, "Oh, we want you to do all," I go, "Call this guy. I mean, he's really great, and he just eats this stuff up, and you'll be much happier with them. I'd rather pass the gig on and have it turn out good than me show up and be mediocre for it. I could bullshit my way through it, but that's not how I like to do things." But just man, studio work is fabulous. It's just there's less and less of it because of the nature of technology now. Because I used to go to studios to work, and now people doing everything at home. I get a lot of calls where people say, "Come over, just want you to do some bass parts for me." And to me, the greatest part of studio work was the camaraderie of musicians in a room and the creative process of having a group of fabulous players all feeding off of each other. Like guitar player would play something, and go, what was that? Play that lick again, and double it up or do something with it. Or you'd be working on a song and you go, "Man, this needs a better intro or a better bridge." And the band would create these things. When I'm sitting in somebody's garage, overdubbing, I can only control my bass part. And that's usually to a click, so I can't even make it breathe or I can play, or I know how to weave around a click. But it's some of the joy of what studio work is all about is really, it's fewer. It doesn't not happen. I mean, I've still done a lot of projects where the band's all in the studio and we're working, but it's less and less, where in the old days it was every day was like that. Let's see what else we got. What means bass to you? I call it the beacon of music. What means bass to me? The foundation. It really is the foundation of all the music I've worked on. You're the kind of liaison between the drummer, which is the rhythmic side of the music, and then the melodic side, which is the guitars and keyboards. And you're that inner space that can control everything. And you really are you're like when somebody's building a house, you put down a great foundation and you can build anything above it. If you put down a weak foundation, whatever above it will eventually collapse. I hope that makes sense. That's kind of, let's see, hip hop seriously. Yeah. I mean, I get called in and I'll come in using, some effects, maybe do some stuff with like an OC2 or an Aguilar octave divider. There's a lot of times where they're going to use synth bass, but they want me to do things that are, like doubling it up, but more expressively so that it can add a little humanity to an otherwise machine part. And I look at those as a really great challenge. And some of those have really been fun. They're not that often, but when it happens, it can be really interesting. So, I never say no. That's one thing. Unless I know in my heart, if I have a gut feeling I'm going to get ripped off and this is really going to be a drag, I'll maybe not show up. And I will not take the date. But that's very, very rare. But for the most part, every time that phone rings, I get excited and I go, "Man, I can't wait." And even if the project itself isn't necessarily a great project, I'll walk in and maybe Vinny Colaiuta's playing drums, or, Tim Pierce or Dean Parks is playing guitar, whatever. And the music, we'll make it as great as we can. And I'm hanging with my buds. So that's really the fun part of that. I just got called to do some new agey stuff. It's good. No, yeah. I mean, I've done new age stuff, and some of that, I've done things where meditative records where they have me just do bass parts and people are going to use it for yoga classes and stuff. To me, it's all valid. It used to always piss me off when I would read some of the articles about bass players in Bass Player magazine and things like that. and you'd look at their discography that they would put in, and it would be all like the A stuff. And you go, that's not reality. So I would put in, like Phil Collins and James Taylor, but I'd also put in like Helen Reddy's I Am Woman or the Weather Girls' It's Raining Men, and all these things. I really enjoy the fact that I get to play on a massive variety of things. So it keeps your juices flowing all the time. You never quite know what you're going to get into. And some of it's, back in the disco days, I'd walk in and see these charts. It was all like, bop, 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 like a lot of 16th note octave stuff and all that. And I go, oh, this is great. It's a challenge. And it was fun, so it's all still fun. Let's see what else. Another question: what advice would you give us struggling musicians through times like this? Gigs can't. Well, we're all in the same boat on that one. The hard part for me right now is just I know when this ends, I'm going to get back to work. So I'm trying to put in an hour or two every night of just playing music, just to keep my chops up. I want to keep my calluses up and all that. It's an incredibly difficult time. I'm going to be 73 years old in a month. And in all these years, I've never seen anything like this. There's been some dark times in this world and in our country, but nothing like this. So we're all kind of on the same boat, traveling the same road with this. All I can do is wish everybody to stay hunkered down, stay safe, stay in touch with your friends and other musicians if you can. We've got a new band called the Immediate Family, which is a group of us that have been playing together for 50 years. It's Danny Korchmar and Russ Kunkel and Waddy Wachtel and myself and another friend of ours, Steve Postel. And we're doing stuff on a cappella. So we're doing some of our songs there and sending them back and forth. And we just finished our new album, and we were sending mixes back and forth and the mastered stuff. And just try to stay viable musically, but also just try to stay safe. This is really unprecedented territory that we're in. So it's hard. It's hard. And especially I feel fortunate that I've worked a long time. So I didn't lose my gig and suddenly I don't have a penny to my name. I'm not rich either, but I can weather this. But I have friends that are really struggling with this now because they were just getting started and they had gigs that were really important to them lined up, and all of a sudden, if they're not postponed, then they're canceled. But there's nobody working now in town. The streets of Los Angeles are dead as a doornail. It's really like some B science fiction horror movie. So I just wish you all the best, everybody out there, that we all survive this okay. But just keep playing, keep thinking about your music. And if you don't know how to read, maybe take the time and study up a little reading, try to figure out, how that all works. Let's see what else. Don't use in-ears, right. But you do use earplugs, or is it? I don't use either. I tried in-ears. I've done a couple things where I had to wear in-ears, like we do, like when we do like the Latin Grammys and like the pre-Grammy show and some of that stuff. You have to wear in-ears because the keyboard player who's on those things. So I work with Cheche Alara, is constantly calling cues and stuff, and they can't run that through wedges. But with Phil Collins and most of the stuff I do, I prefer wedges. I really like sound pressure. I really like the feel of. It's like being in a band. Like as soon as you put the in-ears in, it's like you're in the studio. Now, for singers, it's really great. But for me, and it was funny because the other guys like Daryl Sturmer out with Phill, he would come over. Everybody else on that stage was in ears. I was the only guy with a wedge, and they would come over and stand where I was, and they would go, "Oh God, this is so cool over here." But it's just for me. It's a personal preference, and I know over the years I've lost a certain amount of hearing, but for the most part, I'm still pretty intact, and I don't play loud. I like having my bass rig on the floor. I don't stack rigs where speakers end up at the back of my head. If I had an SVT, I would be laying the cabinet on its side. I really like having the sound lower. The only thing that's ever really kind of a challenge is depending on where the drums are set and how hard they go out. The drummer might be going after cymbals. If you get your head too close to some pretty loud cymbal crashes, it can leave you with some good tinnitus after it. But I'm a wedge guy, and that's that. Let's see. This was from Poland. I'm half Polish. My grandparents on my mother's side came from Poland. My Dingwall sounds amazing. Yeah. It's a great instrument. Sheldon is a remarkable luthier, and he's put together just a beautiful line. Every time I go to the NAMM show and I see his whole display, I just go, man, it's like a kid in a candy store. They're all just beautiful instruments, and every guy I know that's ever tried them just goes, oh man, what a great bass. All my signature ones, I do believe, all come with Mando wire. I got turned on to mandolin fret wire back in 1973. We built a bass from kind of scratch. I had parts. But John Carruthers, who worked at Westwood Music, which was the LA watering hole for musicians back in the 70s, we built this bass, and I had a 62 precision neck. I just happened onto this neck. I bought it. But I like jazz necks configuration. So we reconfigured, he shaped the P bass into a jazz one. And in the course of having to do that, he had to strip the frets out to do the reshaping. And I was walking around the shop and I saw this fret wire hanging on the wall. And I said, what's that? And he goes, that's mandolin wire. I said, let's try that. And he didn't think it would work because he thought I would just eat the frets up too fast with it. But on that bass, I've used that bass on probably 80% of everything I ever recorded in my career, and I'm on my third fret job on it, and I play hard, and I dig in and I do a lot of vibrato and stuff. The fret wire handles it beautifully, and the thing that's nice with the Mando wire is it's so small that you can do all kinds of interval chords and stuff, but if you lighten your touch up a bit, you can. A lot of people have said to me, "Oh man, on that tune, I love your fretless." And I go, "It wasn't fretless. It was, it's fretted, but it's with the Mando wire." So, if you haven't tried it, try it. It's pretty great. And some guys love it, man. Some guys love big, chunky, fat frets and stuff. But I do a lot of glissandos when I'm playing, and I just didn't want that railroad track clicking going on. So having that was really great. Let's see what else. Did you ever give private lessons? No, I've never given private lessons. For some reason, my playing is somewhat unorthodox in like my fingering and stuff, just because of injuries. I've had to accommodate playing in a way that I would not want to teach that. So I've never taught before, and I don't think I ever would. I think there's people that teach that are really, really great at it. They have the right temperament for it, and they really have the right outlook on what's needed. I'm just kind of a fly by the seat of your pants player, so I just go for it. Let's see what else. Favorite bass line I've written. See, that's really, those are difficult because there's so many songs where I really feel fortunate that I've been able to do some bass parts that really dictated the song in a certain way, and they're all in different genres. Some really great country stuff. I mean, certainly Stratus is one of those ones that guys come up all the time to me. I mean, Jeff Beck, every time he sees me, he goes, Stratus, man, Stratus, because they do Stratus in his show. He loves that song so much. Your Smiling Face with James Taylor. A lot of guys ask me about that, or Doctor My Eyes with Jackson Browne. But, I look at almost every bass line as like a child. I put my heart into every one of them. I don't take any of this lightly. I really am dead serious about what I do, even though it's fun. And so if I really sat down and went through discography, I'd probably find some lines that I would say, now this was a line I really loved. But off the top of my head, those are the ones I get asked a lot about. Say, biggest tech failure. Wow. I think this was actually probably one of the biggest. Back when we were doing the Running on Empty tour with Jackson Browne in the late 70s, the section, our band, was the opening act. Now, Gene Serwinski, who owns Serwin Vega Speakers, built me a set of cabinets with each one had, I think they were a single 24-inch speaker in each one. And we got to one of the gigs and they blew. Now, I was tri-amping the system, so I had mids and highs. But these speakers completely shredded. And I had to play our show, which was like an intense rock fusion set with basically a tweeter and an almost not functioning mid-range speaker. So that was like one of my biggest nightmares. They ended up pumping what they could through the wedges, but it wasn't the same as having those 24s behind me. And then the thing that was really terrible was the cabinets were covered with that old gray kind of carpeting that everybody used to cover their stuff with. And the cabinets, the road cases that the cabs were in, had foam lining. Well, once the speakers got pushed into those, they couldn't get them out. It was like they were Velcroed in. So they actually had to come in with a saw and cut the case apart to get the speaker cabinet out of it. So that was just a whole culmination of a lot of crap that went wrong at one time. But those days are over. I haven't heard Stratus, but I'll check it out. Yeah, Ryan, it's Billy Cobham's Spectrum is the album. We cut that in 1973, and it's Billy Cobham on drums, Jan Hammer on keyboards, myself and Tommy Bolin on guitar. We did all the tracks but two. Ron Carter played upright on two tracks that were done with big band. So those are slightly completely different feel on the record. But Stratus is really like one of those iconic songs. It was funny. Billy called me in 2003, and he said, "Look, it's 30 years since we recorded this. Do you want to play? You want to go on the road?" And so we went on the road, and it was Gary Husband playing keyboards, Dean Brown playing guitar, myself and Billy. And it was a trip, man. We were playing these clubs, and I'd look down, and there would be guys in the front row with binoculars on watching. And I'd go, what the hell are these guys doing? But you get this like uber, freaks for the stuff. But you're playing, and the guy's like 10 feet away from you, like this, like watching you play. So it was a trip. How old is your cab now, and what's your favorite brand of bass cab? Well, I said it earlier in the interview. I work with a company called Euphonic Audio. They're based out of New Jersey, and I love their gear. It's really excellent hi-fi stuff. Small cabs with a big sound. So if you're looking for stuff, it's certainly worth checking them out. And let's see what we got. I think we got time for just maybe one or two. Let's see what is. You should do playthroughs of your other projects. I totally dig the Phill Collins. Yeah, well, I've said that on these posts that I'm doing on YouTube of all these songs, when I finish, I'm doing all the songs basically in order from the tour we just finished with Phill Collins, showing the bass parts. Then I'm going to do a few songs that weren't on the tour, but then I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep it up because the response has been great, and I've been having a great time with all this. So I'll try to maybe dig up some Toto and some stuff from our band and maybe Judith Owen, and just show varieties of different things. And I'll take it from there, because this is territory I've never really gone into. I see people posting their bass parts all the time. But now that we're in this kind of quarantine sequestered situation, everybody's looking for things to do to pass the time. And I thought about this, and I thought, well, this would be fun, because I've had guys, come out, especially when we would do stadium gigs and arena gigs, and they go, "Oh man, I love your parts. Some of it's kind of hard to hear because of the room." So I thought this way I could give a basic idea. It's a very strange way to do it because I'm playing a track through a little tiny speaker and playing my bass parts through an amp. So my relationship with the stuff is a little skewed. So the pocket feels weird. I'm used to digging in the middle of a track and not being sitting on top of it. But I think, have you ever quantized MIDI bass in a studio? I love MIDI bass. I got no issues with anything technically. To me, anything goes. If it's right for the song, it's great. Just do it. Don't. I'm not stuck up about anything. And if I don't think I'm the right guy, I say I'm not the right guy and all that. So, but I think they have said this sounds like we are about done here. So I just want to say, man, thank you for this opportunity, you cats. It's been great getting questions like this. I'm totally loving it. I'm loving that Sheldon put this together, that we could do this. Philippe, I'm really happy that you've turned me on to how we could make this whole damn thing work here. But for the most part right now, I'm just wishing everybody to be well through all this. You, your families, all over the world, all the first responders, the doctors, nurses, police, firemen, people stocking the pharmacies and markets and trying to keep as much normalcy as we can. And my heart is with all of you people out there. So let's just get through all this safe, and maybe we could do another one of these at some point. Or if I'm on the road and you're at a gig and you see me, don't hesitate to come up. We can, say hi. I'd love to hook up with you guys. So at this point, all my best wishes.